Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Midlife Revolution. I'm your host, Megan Connor. It is Tuesday, September 2nd, and we are on day 7 of the Donna Adelson trial in Tallahassee, Florida. And it was a bit of a crazy day today. First of all, my apologies to anybody who was in the live stream. They ended court very abruptly, and we were watching the Law and Crime live stream, which buffered for a really long time before abruptly ending. And when I realized that happened, I went to some of the other streams to try and figure out what was going on. By the time I had it figured out and I came back, most of my people were gone. So I apologize for the strange ending this afternoon, but essentially we didn't miss a whole lot. I will tell you that the defense has not rested. Don't worry, trial is going to continue tomorrow. Basically, the judge gave some reprimands and then said that we're going to be back tomorrow morning at 8:30 with testimony beginning at 8:45. So a little bit earlier tomorrow than we have been used to. Now, let me address the acquittal rumors, okay? Just wanted to make sure that you guys understand that Donna Adelson has not been acquitted. But there was a motion for acquittal this morning. Now, most people say that this is a pretty typical tactic of a defense, that they're just going to ask for an acquittal. They're going to ask for a dismissal. They're going to ask for it just because they can. They want to take the opportunity to do it. So I'm glad that they did it, because then that means less chance that Donna can argue ineffective assistance of counsel. So this morning, before court started, and this again, it was another one of those things where I had my live stream ready to go to start at 9 a.m. and Eastern time. And lo and behold, at around 8:30 Eastern time, which was 7:30 my time, they started arguing this acquittal motion. Well, Law and Crime Court TV, nobody had that up when the argument started. And so we all missed the beginning part of it. However, we did get to the meat of it, essentially. So there was a motion to acquit on charges 1 and 3. And essentially, the defense went in and said that they had not proven intent. They went to what was done the day of the actual shooting. And the defense pointed out that Donna Adelson did not contact the shooter or the driver on that day. The judge said, though, did speak with Charles Adelson. And that was kind of where the conspiracy was starting. And he says, what about the inferences or the assumptions? And he says, I'm getting to that, Judge. I'm getting to that. And so the defense attorney then went on about how Donna venting about how someone treats your daughter is not solicitation. That's not the same thing. Then he went on to argue that the birthday gift for Harvey was not the shooting. It was the catering and the party and the getting all of the kids together. Then the judge said, well, what about the admission of guilt and, attempting to flee? He was like, I'm getting to that. So he went on to argue that, we have lots of evidence of Donna planning things, but not actually carrying them out. And he said that that was a reason to find acquittal on count 1 and count 3, because that means that Donna may have been thinking about it. She may have been talking about it, but she didn't actually act on it. So then it was the state's turn to come and rebut the motion. And the state argued that the emails that we've seen detail hate. They detail that Donna benefited the most from this because she would get Wendy and the boys to be living close with her, which is what she wanted this whole time. They noted that she had the make and model of Dan Markel's car in her planner. They noted that she was the one who literally washed the stacks of cash. They noted that she and Harvey did, in fact, stop at Charlie Adelson's house on the night of the shooting, meaning that they would have had the opportunity to drop off the money that was going to be paid to Catherine McVanawa. Then Robert Adelson, Donna told Robert Adelson not to talk to the FBI. And when he said, I already did speak to them, she said, it's okay, you didn't know anything anyway. Then they talked about Donna and Harvey's complete lack of curiosity over who did, in fact, commit the shooting. Then they pointed to Donna saying the TV costs about $5. Then they pointed to the after bump calls from Donna to Charlie. And then, they said, the judge asked, what's your position on the inference that you could infer by all of this evidence that Donna was involved? And Sarah, the other defense attorney, said, there is circumstantial and direct evidence. The direct evidence would be Donna Adelson writing checks. She said it involves the two of us after the bump. There was a confession on direct examination. Money given for false testimony. The jailhouse snitches basically said. There was the script that she wrote. There was Donna adopting the extortion defense on calls and texts after it had been suggested by Charlie and his defense team. There was also fleeing with that fast-tracked emergency visa. And it was Donna saying, you know that I'm next, but I'm not going to let that happen. And so the judge then came back and said that according to the legal standard, we have to consider all of the evidence in the light most favorable to the state. That's the standard. And the defense admitted that, there was the legal standard is that you have to look at everything in the light most favorable to the state. And so therefore the motion was denied. So that all happened prior to the jury being brought in this morning. So take a deep breath, breathe out, motion denied. This was a pretty standard thing to have happen. So Donna's team did what they had to do. That was their job, to present this motion for acquittal, but it was denied. And so the defense is now going to go on with its case in chief. Now, they called several witnesses today. We actually heard from a total of 8 witnesses. One of the witnesses was called back after their morning testimony to testify in the afternoon, and we're going to get to that in just a second. Thanks for being here. Rio for Life, Kim D. Everyone loves Angel's Eyes. I know No More BS was there with us as well in the chat earlier today. Thanks for modding. I really appreciate you guys' help. And thanks to everybody else for being here. Please don't forget to hit your like on the way in. And please let people know about these recaps. If you find them valuable, share them with somebody who is struggling to understand the case but wants to. Just appreciate all of you beautiful humans in the chat and everything you contribute to our trial watching days. It's actually quite entertaining. So the first witness on the stand for the defense this morning was Annie Cunningham. She's been a friend of the Adelsons for about 15 years. And we'll get to how Annie knows the Adelsons in just a second, because her life partner, also testified today, and he was the one with the story. So we'll wait until we get to his testimony before we talk about that. Now, Annie Cunningham basically testified. She's known Donna for a really long time. Donna has never said anything derogatory about Dan Markel. She certainly didn't hate Dan Markel. She was very protective of her children and her grandchildren. She was a typical good grandmother, good mother type of person. And that Annie was there for Donna for moral support while all of this was going on. She allowed Donna and Harvey to stay at their house in South Florida to watch Charlie's trial from their apartment. They're essentially snowbirds. They live in New Jersey, but they have a house in South Florida. And they allowed the Adelsons to use their home so that they said they were afraid to leave their apartment because there were so many bloggers and media people bothering the Adelsons during Charlie's trial. So they were there for moral support and for help, basically. Then the second witness on the stand was Dan Patterson. Now, he is the life partner of Annie Cunningham, and he knew Harvey Adelson in high school. So their friendship goes back many, many years, more than 50 years. And basically, he told this wonderful story about how he and his partner had come down to South Florida. They didn't know anybody. It was Christmas Eve. There was no place to eat. So they found a Chinese restaurant. Now, just about at this point, I was thinking to myself, this sounds like a Seinfeld episode. It really does. Like the very stereotypical, like Jewish people eating at a Chinese restaurant on Christmas Eve. He said that he bit into a spare rib and broke his tooth and called a friend and said, "Who do we know in South Florida? I need somebody right away." And they said, "Well, you know, Harvey Adelson lives there." And the other couple of people they suggested were academics and not actually practicing dentists. And so he contacted Harvey, and Harvey made himself available the very next day to fix his tooth. And yada, 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 they became very close friends. And they started traveling together all over the place. Here was a moment that was really telling to me. Now, what I keep coming back to all the time is I keep thinking about the jury. The jury are from Tallahassee. Tallahassee is more of a blue collar type of a community, working people. South Florida, the Miami area specifically, is more wealthy, more retired people, celebrities, lots of, several $100,000 cars, very expensive apartments. And there is sort of this cultural dynamic between people who live in Tallahassee and people who live in Miami. Understandably, it's one of those things like here in South Texas, it would be the same thing as like small town Texas, as opposed to Dallas, or even as opposed to Austin nowadays, which is a much more expensive, ritzy place nowadays over the last 5 years or so, has become that. And so, as far as trying to relate to the jury or have the jury believe these people or have any sort of common ground with these people, you're going to lose the jury when you start talking about wealthy apartment complexes, and especially when you start talking about all of these cruises and trips and travel, which is what these two friends were talking about, that they had been on all of these trips with the Adelsons. Well, there was even in a moment during Annie Cunningham's testimony where she said that, she and Donna, they all of them went to Japan together. And this trip to Japan was memorable because that's when she understood the dynamic that was happening during Wendy's divorce, how she felt about Dan Markel, all of these things. And when the prosecutor asked her to nail it down to a specific time, when was it that you went on this trip to Japan? She said, "Oh, we went on so many trips, I can't even remember." She couldn't even remember what year it was. And I commented in the chat, what an incredible amount of privilege you must have to not even remember the year that you went to Japan because you've been on so many wonderful trips. Now, I've been on a few nice trips over the course of my lifetime, and I can tell you exactly when they happened because most of my trips were road trips or, going to visit family. If I went to a country where I didn't have family to stay with, that was a big deal. But obviously to these people, they did it all the time, dozens and dozens of trips. And so it wasn't that special, wasn't that memorable, couldn't even remember the year. Definitely jury is going to be checked out on that because most of these people, as working class people, they're going to have one vacation a year, and it's probably just going to be a staycation where they just don't have to work and they're going to stay at home. They're not going to be going to Japan. McSpunky, great to see you. The Uinta Mountains are beautiful and lovely. I hope you're staying safe. I hope it's not bad weather for you. I hope you're traveling well. So yeah, this just all really smacked to me of a Seinfeld episode. It was not relatable. I'm sure the jury didn't find it relatable. And I listened a little bit to Joel from Surviving the Survivor on his midday recap today, talking about the fact that the jury really seemed checked out during these testimonies. They were looking in a different direction. They weren't really paying attention, except when the state came back up to do their cross-examination. And then all of a sudden they were interested and they were paying attention again. So that's really something that is important to note. So those were the first two witnesses. Now, I also want to let you guys know that after these first two witnesses testified, they went back down into the gallery and sat next to Harvey. So it's kind of hard to believe the credibility of a witness when you know that they're just super close friends with the Adelsons. When they literally leave the stand and go back down to sit next to the husband of the accused, that to me as a juror, I would be like, oh, so they're just super close friends. And it gives to me the testimony a little bit less credibility. The other really important point I want to make is that during Annie Cunningham's testimony, she testified that Donna called her on the day of Dan Markel's murder, and she was just distraught, and she was very upset, and she was definitely, overcome with emotion. That was the testimony. Now, put a pin in that because we're going to come back to it. I did not do a wardrobe change, salt and pepper. I just took my jacket off because I have my air conditioning turned to, not super cold, and it's getting warm in here now that I'm in here with my daughter and my dogs. It gets warm. Sorry, but listening to some of the testimony this morning with that accent, it's really hard for me not to fall into wanting to imitate the accent because I did it so often when I lived in Connecticut. Story for another time. Anyway, the third person on the stand today was Kelsey Guay. She is a senior digital forensic examiner hired by the defense to rebut the testimony of Sergeant Corbett, who testified to all of the digital forensic evidence, like all of the phone calls specifically. Okay. And you're right, Judy Jettison. It's New York. These are New Yorkers. They're actually from Jersey. So it's a little bit different, but kind of the same. Lots of people in New York who snowbird down in Miami, South Florida. Anyway, that's going to devolve over time. I'm going to get snarkier. So, excuse me. Essentially, Kelsey Guay was there to rebut the testimony of Sergeant Corbett, but she was on the stand for quite a long time. She spoke a lot. She gave a lot of information about how she collected the evidence, how she reviewed it, how she compared it to Sergeant Corbett. It was kind of boring to most people. Thank goodness for you guys. I'm a nerd. And so for me, what was really important was to look at focusing what she focused on. Donna, she focused on Donna Adelson's cell phone records. Now, you may or may not remember, Detective Corbett testified that there were approximately 417 calls from Donna Adelson's phone to other phones during the period between May 2nd and July 20th of 2014. This was the time period in question because the shooting took place on July 18th of 2014. And so that's basically what Detective Corbett or Sergeant Corbett put out, is that there were 417 calls. Well, she wanted to be accurate. She spent a lot of time talking about the fact that she cross-referenced and recreated Sergeant Corbett's chart. And then she went in to look at actual seconds on the end of phone calls. You may remember that when Sergeant Corbett testified, that when the defense cross-examined, they asked him about a couple of specific calls that happened, in a close time frame, within a couple of minutes of each other. And the defense attorney asked Sergeant Corbett, did you know that this call occurred at this minute and these seconds? So this one could have come before that one, or this one could have come after that one. And Sergeant Corbett said, no, I didn't pay attention to the seconds. Well, this forensic examiner did pay attention to the seconds. And I agree. When you have 2 or 3 phone calls that happen in succession within the same 1 to 2 minute period, it's very difficult to distinguish which happened first if you don't know the second marker that comes at the end. And so what she testified to is that when she went and redid this whole chart of Sergeant Corbett, she said that there were lots of duplicates and that there were some call events that she would not consider to be a connected call. For example, if it lasts less than 20 seconds, it's not likely that they actually spoke to the person on the other line, but that it was a pocket dial or a misdial, or that the person said, hello, hello, couldn't see or couldn't hear, and then the person hung up. So she said when she went back over it and eliminated the duplicates, what she came up with is that there were 393 call events as opposed to 417. Now, when she got cross-examined, she basically had to admit that she was paying attention to details and she was paying attention to specific calls, but none of the evidence that she gave really materially changed Sergeant Corbett's testimony. It was just the amount of calls that got whittled down, but there was nothing to say about the fact that all of these calls did take place. There were over 69 unique connected calls that happened, but that it's possible that Sergeant Corbett had an overinflated number, allegedly. But she couldn't say anything as to the substance of the calls or to how that materially affects the state's case. All she could say is that she paid closer attention to the actual numbers. That's what happened on cross-examination. Then there was a redirect. And the defense at this point asked about the validity of the state's case and said, is it possible that because it was an overinflated number of calls that we're mischaracterizing the flurry of communication that happened between Donna and all of these other people? Well, obviously they're just trying to impeach the state's case. And this witness really didn't have anything to say positive for the defense. All she could say is that, yes, there was an overinflated number, but, there was nothing that I could say that really, that I could impeach what Sergeant Corbett said. Then there was a recross. And the specific question on the recross was this call to Annie, the friend, the day of Dan Markel's shooting, was it detective? Was it detected in this preponderance of evidence that Sergeant Corbett presented? And the expert had to say that, in all honesty, there was no call detected on WhatsApp, because that's what Annie testified to, that she was called on WhatsApp. There was no call detected on WhatsApp during this investigation. So that was the recross. So we had direct examination, we had cross-examination, then we had redirect. Then the state asked for this recross. So they got that one question in. Then we had the redirect for the defense to come back and talk about that one question of the non-detected WhatsApp call, and basically had to, pull up the records again and then say that, on the date of the death, which was the shooting, which was the 18th of July, there were only 3 calls between 8:30 p.m. and 1 p.m. from Donna Adelson to anybody else. And none of those were a WhatsApp call. Then the state did a brilliant thing. They recalled Annie Cunningham from that morning and pushed her about this WhatsApp call from Donna. Was this call from WhatsApp? Did Donna call you from WhatsApp? And she says, yeah, I'm pretty sure that she called me from WhatsApp. And Georgia Kappelman said, guess what? Would it surprise you to learn that phone calls were not available on the WhatsApp app in 2014? And she said, well, it must not have been WhatsApp. It must have been Viber, which was another app that they would use to contact each other, talk with each other at some points. So basically, the call that Annie claimed took place on the day of the murder, when Donna was so distraught and upset over Dan being shot, never happened. Because Annie said it came in through WhatsApp. And Georgia said, well, what calls weren't available from WhatsApp at that point. So she said, well, it must have been a different app. Kind of undermined her credibility, in my opinion. I'm just saying that's my opinion. But basically, the state did a good job of shutting that down. What do you guys think? I'm interested to know. Then the next witness number 1, 2, 3. Technically, I'm counting Annie Cunningham as just one witness and not two. So this would be witness number 4, the 4th unique person. Okay. Annie Cunningham had her grand piano repossessed in that moment. Richard Chagrin, which some of you were asking about from the call records that we watched between Donna Adelson and Charlie Adelson. There was a particular call where on the transcript, this name Chagrin came up. Well, here he is now. Richard Chagrin shows up as a witness to this case. He said that the Adelsons and he belonged to this gourmet club together where they would get together and, cook fancy meals. He said his wife, Susan, is an attorney. She practices real estate law as well as estate planning. And she was helping the Adelsons with their estate planning and their real estate law at the time that all of this went down, but specifically at the time that Charlie was on trial. And basically testified to the fact that on November 7th of 2023, he helped Donna and Harvey obtain a visa. And he helped them to make plane reservations. He said that day, Donna invited his wife, Susan, over to see the dress that she was planning to wear to Lincoln's bar mitzvah. Again, this is the dress that she said to Wendy, you can just bury me in the dress that I bought for Lincoln's bar mitzvah. So apparently Donna invited Susan Chagrin over to see this dress that she had bought for the bar mitzvah. And in the meantime, Richard helped to get a visa and make plane reservations. Now, what he claims is that he was just there to help with the technology. He was a little more technologically savvy than were the Adelsons. And he basically made a suggestion that they buy one-way tickets to Vietnam because it was more economical to buy a one-way ticket based on the money than it was to buy a round-trip ticket. He said that he suspected that flights back from Vietnam to the United States would be a lot cheaper than going the whole round-trip route. He also said that he helped them with the 60 or 90-day visa because they didn't know how long they would be gone. And he suggested that they do the 90-day visa just in case they needed to be gone a little longer. They said they were being bothered. The Adelsons said they were being bothered by media. And when they were asked whether or not they had been to Vietnam, or the Adelsons had been to Vietnam, he said, yes, I've been there. It's a lovely country. The food is wonderful. The people are wonderful. They said, did you consider it relaxing? He said, yes, I had a great time. Well, that was his experience, not necessarily the Adelsons' experience. Then when asked how Donna was as a mother and as a grandmother, he said that she was the model Jewish mother, more so with the grandkids because she felt much closer to them. On cross-examination, Georgia Kappelman, this is one of the reasons that I love her. Her first question out of the box was, she was a model Jewish mother and grandmother. So do most model Jewish grandmothers suggest dressing their kids up like Nazis? Do most Jewish grandmothers suggest having their grandchildren baptized as Catholic in order to get back at their dad? Well, not so much, right? The bar mitzvah, by the way, was less than 90 days away from this departure. So it was November 7th that they obtained their visas. The bar mitzvah was going to take place in January. In fact, January 14th. Thank you to Salt and Pepper and Crash for confirming that for me in the chat earlier today. And so essentially they had, the defense tried to make a big deal about the fact that they were definitely planning to be back for this bar mitzvah. But when you're flying to Vietnam in November, is there any guarantee that you're going to be able to get a flight back in January? That was all of that in question. So then Georgia Kappelman basically said that in the deposition that this witness gave, Richard Chagrin, said that he was just the conduit to the technology. Well, Georgia said, but you were the one who suggested that they have only a one-way ticket. So you weren't just the conduit to the technology, you were also advising them as to what kind of a ticket they should get and how long they should be gone, etc. He said, well, no, it was just more that, that was part of the suggestion, was that I realized it might be cheaper for them to get a one-way ticket. And so I did offer that. And then he did mention that his wife did the estate planning for Donna and Harvey. Then on redirect, they talked about that deposition transcript, and he clarified that I didn't make decisions, I just made suggestions. And then it was Donna and Harvey who ultimately made the decisions. Now, I want to revisit that phone call between the three, Donna Adelson and the Chagrins. Now that I know who they are and what role they played, I kind of want to go back and listen to that phone call again and see what I can glean from it. But I digress. On to witness number 5, Tarana Khan. She is a mitigation specialist right now in the state of Georgia. She's also done investigations. Sounds like she did some divorce and custody, but basically was trying to get sentences lessened for her clients. That's what a mitigation specialist does. Finds things, mitigating factors that would allow some leniency from the court. But when she was in Florida, she was investigating the facts of cases. And she said from 2016 to 22, she was an associate. She had her associates as a paralegal. In 2014, she had a certificate in sociology. She's a licensed private investigator in Florida in 2022. But basically, she was called to impeach the testimony of Patricia Byrd. You'll remember she is the first jailhouse informant that testified on Friday of last week. Basically, this investigator went and met with Patricia Byrd. Their conversation, by the way, was not recorded at the behest of defense counsel at the time. Basically, Ms. Khan testified that Ms. Byrd did not ever tell Ms. Khan that there were any promises of land, a trailer, fixing her teeth, $10,000, none of that stuff from Donna Adelson, and that there was no admission of guilt from Donna Adelson. And this investigator said that she has never met Donna or spoken with her, and so there's no reason for her to lie about this. Well, on cross-examination, they wanted to know, why did you not record the jail interviews? That would have been a pretty crucial piece of evidence for you to have if you had this jailhouse informant recorded as having said that they were not offered any kind of compensation for their testimony. But alas, they had no answer for that. They were not asked to record the jail interviews, and so they didn't. Then on redirect, the defense came back, I think, with a pretty lame rebuttal to that, saying, how did you ensure that you knew exactly what she was saying was correct? And she said, well, I just took really good notes. Well, that's great. I take really good notes too, but I also missed some things. And if I had a recording of a conversation between myself and someone else, that would be a much more credible piece of information than just the notes that I took. Sometimes I get things wrong or I forget things. Sometimes I see things through my own lens and I see things differently than other people. So what is important to me on these recaps may not be important to other people as well. So again, having a recording of those conversations would have been kind of important to the defense, I would think. Then witness number 6, Eddie Barnes, who has been in criminal investigations for at least 10 years of his 27-year career. And he was retained by Donna Adelson's original attorney, which, if you remember, was Daniel Roshbaum, the same attorney that defended Charlie Adelson in Charlie's case. Now, just a little bit of tea about that situation. So Donna didn't believe that Charlie was going to be found guilty, but he was found guilty. And when he was found guilty, she had so much faith in the fact that Charlie was actually innocent and wrongly convicted that she hired the same attorney to handle her defense. Now, the problem is that they knew that Charlie Adelson was going to be called as a witness in this case. And so Charlie's attorney would be cross-examining Charlie on the stand. And because of that conflict of interest, Charlie was going to have to sign an affidavit basically stating that it was okay with him, that there was a conflict of interest between this attorney representing his mother and cross-examining him on the stand. Well, apparently Charlie only gave verbal permission for that to happen, and he never did sign the actual statement that he had to sign. And so eventually Dan Roshbaum was removed from the case, and Donna had to find new attorneys. So a lot of this took place. A lot of these conversations with the jailhouse informants and the investigators took place while Dan Roshbaum was still Donna's attorney. And so maybe there were some balls that got dropped. Maybe he didn't handle things perfectly. I don't know. And I'd love to have Aida Shaw. I wish Aida Shaw was here at this point to tell me if Donna can argue ineffective assistance of counsel when her prior attorney screwed stuff up and now she has new attorneys. I don't know. I would think if you're an attorney taking over a case, you would want to be really thorough in correcting any errors that were made by the previous attorney. But it seems like this defense team, I'm going to put in air quotes, they don't really have things together. They don't really know exactly what they're doing. They're so disorganized. And every single time it's time for them to come up for cross-examination or even a direct examination, now that they're putting on their case in chief, they seem to have to be searching through piles of papers, searching for computer files. They seem super messy and disorganized. And then even in the middle of testimony, sometimes they have to say, give me just a second while they go rifle through more papers. It just really seems like a completely disjointed defense. Anyway, all of that being said, Eddie Barnes was retained, by Donna Adelson's original attorney, Dan Roshbaum, to go and meet with Miss Bird. So he went to the Leon County Jail. He met with Miss Bird in an attorney booth to get information about statements that Catherine Magbanua may have given her. Again, this investigator states that Miss Bird did not indicate that there were any offers from Donna to Miss Bird, just meaning that Miss Bird didn't tell him about any offers. Now, he also may not have asked. Again, did not record this interview at the behest of Donna's original attorneys. Anyway, he was instructed not to record the interviews. I just want to make that perfectly clear. Isn't that convenient? So he had met with Donna Adelson about 4 weeks prior to going to meet with Miss Bird and basically cautioned Patricia Bird that the state is going to try to imply that you were promised something to say this. The state is going to try to imply that you're doing this just to get reduced time on your sentence, and cautioned her about that. And he did note that Patricia Bird was expecting an offer from the state on August 30th of 2024. So on cross-examination, Georgia Kappelman reiterated that the defense thought that Patricia Bird had information and that she said she had talked to Donna Adelson. And here is what Catherine Magbanua said, according to Eddie Barnes, when he interviewed Miss Bird. Catherine said, after we had Dan unalived, we tried to get the money because we knew that my former boyfriend had lots of money. And so then that's when Patricia Bird replied, that's effing crazy. That's extortion. As far as we know, this is the first time that word came up in this case. Then Catherine Magbanua said, I have kids I have to send to college. And this was basically the testimony that Patricia Bird offered as evidence to this investigator on behalf of Donna Adelson. He said that he immediately called the attorneys, the defense attorneys, when he left the jail after this interview and immediately sent a report within 1 hour, but he was never asked to record. And the prior defense attorney never listed Patricia Byrd as a potential witness. Now, here's where I think ineffective assistance of counsel might come in, because it's a pretty big mistake for Dan Roshbaum to not call or list Miss Byrd as a witness, because she has material information that would support this extortion theory. Goodness. Then on redirect, Eddie Barnes, the investigator, said that he reported exactly what Patricia Byrd said. There was an objection about this, and it was overruled, and the judge was noticeably annoyed by this objection. On redirect, he asked, were you surprised to learn that the prior defense counsel, would you be surprised to learn that the prior defense counsel did list Patricia Byrd as a witness? He said, no, I wouldn't be surprised, because that seems like he should have done that. And so basically, defense counsel is trying to say that Patricia Byrd was listed as a witness. And he said, yes, that was my understanding. Now, this witness was retained for possible, more questioning to come up in the future. Now, right after this witness, the jury was excused because we found out that the next witness to be called had already been in the courtroom listening to the testimony of that first investigator, the female investigator, Tirana Khan. The bailiff reported that this witness had been in the courtroom for 15 to 20 minutes. And so there was this big hullabaloo over whether or not he'd even be allowed to testify, because he was not following I want to make sure I get this right, the sequestration rules, where witnesses have to be sequestered. You're not allowed to listen to any trial testimony before you testify. Once you have testified, then you can, if you're not going to be recalled. But I said this during the live stream today, that usually when you're testifying in a court case, you get to the court and you tell them, I'm testifying in this court case, in this courtroom, and they usually escort you to an anteroom that is outside of the courtroom, where you won't be exposed to anybody speaking about the case or any televisions with closed captioning that have the case on there. You sure as heck do not go up to the courtroom and sit in the courtroom in the gallery and listen to testimony that's being given. But that's what this guy did. Apparently, he didn't follow directions, or they didn't give him directions, because the defense counsel then said, outside the presence of the jury, of course, that they texted this witness and asked him where he was. And then they found out he was in the courtroom and asked him to leave the courtroom. So then he went outside for the next testimony. And before he called, though, they had to have a whole big thing about whether or not he was going to be allowed to testify. Well, defense counsel said he's a realtor. He doesn't have anything to do with the testimony of the investigators or the jailhouse informants. His testimony is going to be very short. We should just go ahead and let him testify. And eventually, then it was the judge who said, okay, we'll go ahead and let this person testify. So this person's name is Tim Kelly. He is a realtor. He testified that in 2011, he knew Dan Markell, and Dan Markell had hired him to show some real estate to Harvey and Donna Adelson in the Tallahassee area, because apparently in 2011, Harvey and Donna were considering getting a home in the Tallahassee area so they could be closer to Dan and Wendy and the boys. There was some question about a realtor named Lisa Carey and whether or not he then referred the Adelsons to that realtor, but he said, no, I worked with her, but I don't think that I would have referred them at that time. So he showed some homes to Donna and Harvey, and then he stated, just for good measure, that his testimony was not affected by what he listened to in the courtroom. Then on cross-examination, they clarified that it was Dan Markell that requested to show homes to Donna and Harvey, and he said, yes, that's true. They said, were you aware that their divorce happened in the fall of 2012? He said, yes. And they said, so that would have been about a year prior to when, or sorry, you showed the house as about a year prior to the divorce. And he said, yes, with a little bit of a laugh, meaning that, he did the math like, okay, I guess it was about a year prior. Is this really what I'm asked to testify to? Because anybody could do that math, right? And then she said approximately 2 years before October 31st of 2013. And he again confirmed, yes, that was about 2 years. The reason that date is significant is because that's the first date Catherine Magbanawaz says that Charlie Adelson approached her asking if he could find someone to harm somebody who his sister was in a custody dispute with. And that was it for that witness. Much ado about nothing. So then witness number 8, Detective Joshua Turner. He's been a criminal investigator since 2020, and he interviewed Drina Bernhardt, which, if you'll remember, she was the second jailhouse informant that came and testified. Now, when Detective Joshua Turner met with Drina Bernhardt, he then notified the state attorney's office that, hey, this person has something to say about this case. He said that he attended a recorded interview, recorded this time, between Drina Bernhardt and the state attorney's office. So I think that was a really good idea to record this interview. This interview took place on December 20th of 2024. And they were able to see a video of Drina Bernhardt talking to Donna Adelson in front of a camera at the jail. They reviewed that pod annex surveillance video and they downloaded the video. Now, again, this is on direct examination. So this is the defense attorney questioning Detective Joshua Turner. They played this video because Georgia Kappelman insisted that the entirety of the video be admitted into evidence. And basically, this video was taken one day before Drina Bernhardt met with the state attorney's office. Now, the reason that's significant is because if this had happened the day after they met with the state attorney, that would impeach this witness because it would have said, you met with us, you realized we were interested in this information about Donna Adelson, and then you went and got it. But this happened the day before. And we found out later on that Georgia Kappelman was basically saying she was considering putting it off because there was some illness, the holidays, whatever. She was going to meet with this person even later than that, but this is how it came up. Now, we watched this video almost in its entirety. It was super boring, guys, just so you know. You don't really need to see it, but essentially it shows Drina sitting at a table. Donna Adelson walks up. They go to a separate table together. Drina gives her a paper to look at. We see Drina writing on that paper. Then Donna Adelson takes a look at that paper, and then she starts writing on the paper. Then Drina takes her notebook back, but Donna is still writing on that separate piece of paper. MB, thanks for being a member for 12 months. The question is, does the jury put what together? The fact that the witness was seen one day after this happened? Are they realizing that that's, it's more suspicious if it happens after the fact, after the meeting? I don't know, but I think that's something probably that if I were Georgia Kappelman, I would bring up in my closing statements, just to remind the jury the significance of that. So then Donna takes Drina's book again and starts writing on it. Then Drina takes back the notebook, but Donna's still writing on that separate piece of paper that she was given by Drina. And they do all the timestamps on this, guys, but it was super boring. They note that it's a pink notebook. Now there's a pink notebook on the table. Drina gives Donna that notebook. And then for a lot of this video, they're both writing in their notebooks. Now, I'm calling back to Drina's testimony where Drina said that she was supposed to copy the entire script that Donna wrote for her and give back Donna the original script. So then about, I don't know, a third of the way through the video, Donna Adelson hands something to Drina and they talk about it for several minutes. Then Donna gets up, she walks around a little bit and she sits back down. Then At 54 minutes, they're still looking through pages. 55 minutes, they're still both just discussing what has been written. Then at 1 hour in, Drina opens a new notebook, and they both are writing, each in their separate notebooks, until the end. The whole video was 1 hour and 40 minutes long. So it was one of those that they did get to fast forward through it a little bit, but it was super boring to watch and listen to. So on cross-examination, they did a great job of pointing out that, yes, Drina said she was instructed to copy down this script and give it back to Donna. Then, Georgia said they did discuss meeting with her later, and the investigator remembered that Georgia said, maybe we want to meet in a few days from now or whatever, because Georgia didn't know it was the day after this video had been taken. All she heard was that there was somebody who had information about the case. They wanted to meet with her. She didn't know that the day before she had been sitting down with Donna and there was all this writing going on. Then Donna said to this investigator, there's no way to tell from the video who was writing what. And that's correct. And she said, are you a handwriting expert? Would you be able to tell what was Donna's and what wasn't Donna's writing? And he said, no. And she said, would you be willing to defer to the expert who is the handwriting expert? And he said, yes. And that was a great move by Georgia, because she had a handwriting expert come in and say unequivocally the writing that they received was Donna Adelson's handwriting. So then very abruptly, the jury was excused for the day. And what happened on the live stream that I was watching, I was streaming the Law and Crime, because they tend to start a little bit earlier than Court TV does. And they also have subtitles, which I appreciate. And just very abruptly, the judge was dismissing the jury. And while he was dismissing the jury, the stream froze, and it was frozen for several minutes. So while it was frozen, I was going around to the other channels trying to figure out if anybody else had the stream live up there and everything. And by the time I got back to my stream, there was the screen comes up when you're done watching a YouTube video with all the, mosaic of different videos you can click on next. And pretty much everybody was gone out of my stream. So I basically just said, guys, I'll catch you on the recap. I was able to find, there was another stream, I think it was the Court TV stream, that did actually finish what the judge said. And here's what happened. He basically said, he told the jury to be back at 8:30 tomorrow morning. This all happened, by the way, at 2:46 p.m. Eastern time. So it was only about 1:45 my time, and I was shocked and stunned that it was ending this quickly. I had gone on a little break, and I came back, and all hell was breaking loose. So the judge basically admonished the defense team and said, I don't want there to be any more violation of sequestration orders, meaning make sure that your witnesses know they're not supposed to be sitting in the freaking courtroom waiting to testify. And, the defense attorneys apologized and said that wouldn't be a problem. And then he said, be back here at 8:30 in the morning. We'll resume with testimony at 8:45 a.m., at which point the main defense attorney, whose name escapes me, Josh Zeman, I think it is, said, well, we have a witness coming in tomorrow, but her flight doesn't get in until 10 a.m. To which the judge said, see you in the morning, which to me, I read as, I'm super annoyed by that statement. Something you could have told me earlier, because now I've got the jury coming in at 8:30 tomorrow morning. And Zellman, thank you, not Zeman, Zellman, appreciate that. I thought that the judge was super annoyed by that. So what may end up happening tomorrow morning is that we all are sitting there twiddling our thumbs until 10 a.m. Eastern. Well, later than that, if her flight gets in at 10, she's not going to be at court until probably 11. Let's be honest. Not knowing whether she's checking a bag or how far away the courthouse is from the airport, et cetera, et cetera. But the judge was none too happy to hear. Now, hopefully, the defense team isn't completely inept, and they'll have someone who can give testimony in the morning before this other witness shows up. But from the way that it sounded that Josh was talking about this, just in very hushed tones, kind of like, not coming in until 10 o'clock flight. Just didn't really want to say it out loud. It kind of sounds to me like they don't have anybody else to testify and that this is probably going to be their last witness, except for Donna. Now, I think they want Donna to go last for dramatic effect, for memory effect. I do think Donna's going to testify, but I don't think they want Donna to go first thing tomorrow morning and then be followed by this other witness. I think that they want Donna to be the last witness. So it'll be interesting to see if they do have anybody else, because I'm willing to guess that if they don't have another witness and Donna's going to testify, the judge might actually make Donna testify first tomorrow morning before this other witness gets into town. So I, for one, am extremely looking forward to Donna's testimony, because I think it's going to be probably the worst thing for her defense. I think she's not going to be able to help but to give herself away as to who she really is and what she really values. I don't think that her testimony will resonate with these Tallahassee jurors. I really think that she's going to come across as entitled, and I think that she's going to come across as callous and unfeeling. And I think it's going to be a bad look for the entire defense, but especially for Donna. Now, I have heard from everybody else that Donna is going to take the stand. So people are asking, do I really think Donna will testify? Well, yeah, they've said she's going to testify. So I think she will. But yeah, I would love it if she was forced to get on in the downtime, because, that's never a good thing when, you want somebody to be your last star closer, like wrap it all up, put a bow on it, make everything nice for the jury. If they have to go out of order, it's going to be a really difficult day for Donna and the defense team, which I'm not sad about it, not mad about it. I think Donna is probably, no matter when she testifies, it's going to be the worst thing for her defense. And I think the jury are going to see through her. And yeah, her testimony will last for a really, really long time. Yeah, Kinder Kim, she probably will make lots of complaints. But once you're up there in the witness stand, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, she could try to hold things up by asking for an extra cardigan and, for her support paralegal to come over and pat her on the shoulder. But the judge isn't necessarily going to accommodate those requests. So I can't believe that I'm saying it, but we're not even at an hour yet. And I'm wrapping up here mainly because court ended about 3 or 4 hours earlier than I thought that it would, which tells me the defense really doesn't have anybody else that they can put on. I think they pretty much played their entire hand today, and it is not looking good. So I am interested to know what questions you have. What comments do you have? Do you think there's anything I missed or something that I got wrong today? Please put them here in the chat. I'm happy to try and answer anything that I possibly can. And my apologies again to everybody watching live stream with me today. The end was a little bit chaotic, and I apologize. But that was definitely a law and crime issue. And for once, it was not my fault, the technical difficulties, although I did have some earlier in the day that definitely were my fault. The thing is, when I've got my cell phone right here, I've got my computer right here, and I put my AirPod in so that I can monitor what's happening. If I play a video or something, I can hear it right here. And that helps me know that you guys can hear it as well. Well, unfortunately, if I have my AirPod in and I walk into the kitchen or to go let my dogs out or anything like that, it switches away from my computer and onto my phone, and it pauses whatever it is I'm playing, in this case, the live stream. So I have to go in and hit play again. And I didn't realize that had happened earlier today. And so I was like, I'm just going to put my AirPods away and not use them again. That's why a lot of times you'll see me using these big clunky headphones, which are not my favorite. But I did learn this trick from Donna Adelson. If you turn your headphone around on this side and just put, one ear on, then I can hear what's going on in the room in this ear, since this one isn't on, and I can hear what was in the headphones over here. I learned that from Donna. You learn something new every day, although I think she was not doing that on purpose. I did forget Irish Jen was here earlier today. She's going to be here with us the whole rest of the time. I appreciate that. So we've got a few questions that I can address here real quickly, which I definitely will. David Johnson says, what question would you want to ask Donna? Well, I've said this before, and I will continue to say it again and again. Whenever I have to ask a question where I'm trying to discern what somebody really values and what their character is really like and how introspective that they're able to be, I like to ask them in this series of events, was there anything that you did that you regret? Because those of us who have a little bit of introspection and a little bit of self awareness are able to come up with some regrets. Like, I didn't handle this well, and I wish I had done that differently, and I regret that outcome. But people who are narcissistic and people who have an overinflated sense of their own importance and people who have no self-awareness will not really be able to answer that question. I'll give you an example, and I've said this one before, but when asked, what role did you play in the demise of your own marriage relationship? What would you have done differently, or what do you regret? And this person said, I think I got married too young. That's not really an admission of I did something wrong. It was like the circumstances were not right for me. And that's why this whole thing broke down. So I would probably ask Donna in this whole series of events, what is one thing, or if you want to name several, but what is the main thing that you think of? I really wish I would have done that differently, or I regret the way that I handled that. If you listen to Donna's friends, specifically Annie Cunningham, she mentioned this Nazi uniform email and said that Donna really regretted saying that. Did she, though? Or was Annie just saying that? Because a lot of times when we deal with toxic people, we make excuses for them because we know that being in proximity to a toxic person, being friends with them, continuing to allow them in our life sort of is an indictment of our own character. And sometimes, in order to make us feel better about continuing that relationship, we explain away some of their behavior because it makes us more comfortable with the idea that we spent so much time in the company of a person who was so toxic. So I wonder if Annie Cunningham really believes that Donna regretted saying those things about the Nazi uniform, or if she just told herself that was the case so she would feel better about being friends with Donna. I don't know. What do you guys think? It's curious. Salt and Pepper asks, what Tom Petty songs should go on the Verdict Watch playlist? Well, I'm going to say Free Falling is probably the number one because, I feel like that's what the defense has been doing this whole time. I also have said before that many, many times the song keeps going through my head that has the chorus that says, you got lucky, babe, when I found you. And I feel like that's how Donna feels about everyone in her life. So there's another one, but I appreciate your suggestions. Yeah, when we are in Verdict Watch, we'll play some Tom Petty songs. Maybe we'll watch some videos and, compare them to the defense attorney who looks like Tom Petty. That's what we're talking about. For those of you who haven't watched much of the trial, one of Donna's defense attorneys is a former judge named Jackie Fulford, and she has a haircut that makes her look a lot like Tom Petty. So there's that. Dreamweaver says, do you think Charlie will testify to explain about Donna not or was extorted, was or was not extorted, maybe? I think that Charlie is most likely to be called as a rebuttal witness. And I think that he is most likely to be called if Donna testifies. I don't think the defense will call him, but I think that the state will call him to rebut Donna's testimony if she testifies. I don't know what they will have him testify to, considering he's a convicted person. I don't know how much credibility the jury will give him, especially after hearing all of those damning phone calls where Charlie comes off as not a good guy, not likable at all, especially the comments that he made about his sister being 47 years old. And he said, even if you put a Victoria's Secret model in front of me, if she was 47 years old, I'm not going to date her because I could date a 25-year-old instead. Like, very tone deaf, very awful. Something that like a son should not be saying to his mother about his sister. Like, just so gross. Is it stop driving my car around or my heart around? Stop dragging my heart around. Yes, thank you. That's what I was wondering. Yeah, poor Tom petty. One Tin Soldier is a great song. Love that one. Charlie is going to say, Donna's a wonderful mother. She's the reason I am the man I am today. Which is funny because he's in prison. And yeah, for those of you who were asking, Charlie got transferred to a prison in South Dakota following some unpleasantries that, he was not being treated well by some of the other inmates. And so they did fly him from South Dakota to Miami. I think he still is in Miami awaiting to find out whether or not he's going to testify. Linjen 2, great to see you. I love your Yzma avatar there. So many Yzma quotes going through my head right now that I have to resist the urge to say them, and I will not say them right now. We tend to take their side as verbatim. We don't look at possible different scenario because we are their dedicated friend or family, and that's true. I've certainly done that with my family members over the years, taking what they say at face value, not questioning what they say, because I didn't have any reason to at the time. And now in hindsight, I'm like, I should have questioned everything. I just showed Jackie to my hubby and he laughed at the reference. It is pretty stunning, basically. And I agree with you. No more Charlie on the stand. He rambles on and on. But I do have to say, Georgia does a great job of putting him in his place and shutting him up and saying, answer the one question that I asked you. That would have been great. I did not see that Charlie got fast food on his transport. Got Wendy's. Of all the places, Charlie, that you could choose to get an American cheeseburger. I mean, if you're wanting something like that, like a snack, a treat on your transport, really, you're going to take Wendy's? Gross. Yes, allegedly, we heard that the Latin Kings do not like Charlie very much, and he was in danger in prison. Georgiana, no, her son, Donna, son Charlie, was not on the stand today. I don't think he's going to be called unless he's called to rebut Donna's testimony, but I could be proven wrong. Yzma is my alter ego. Yes, I identify with Yzma on many, many levels. I like that so much. Driver may have chosen for Charlie, true, and they may have been going through one of those tiny, tiny towns where there is only like a Wendy's and a Sonic and a McDonald's, and then, what are you going to do? Yeah, Charlie should have made a run for the border, but I think they were watching him way too closely. I don't think he would have gotten very far. Jody Parker, thanks for this. Ineffective assistance of counsel is a high bar to clear, it seems. I've heard some experts say they would have to prove there would be a different outcome if she had better representation, and that is true. That's what I've heard as well. They have to prove that, given the fact that if they had done things differently, if they had called this witness, if they had, not. And here's another thing that I found out today that I didn't know, is that Dan Roshbaum turned over Donna's calendar when he didn't have to, or at least the page of the calendar where Dan Markel's license number and the make and model of his car was noted. Didn't have to turn that over in discovery, but did it anyway. That is a huge mistake to make. Now, I'll just tell you a little bit about how discovery works, at least in the family court world. And I think it's very similar in the criminal world, although I'm sure there are some different rules of evidence. But basically, the state would put in a request for discovery, which would say, for example, all calendar pages that pertain to the day in question or that reference the co-conspirators. So you would turn over only the calendar page that had to do with July of 2014 and any other calendar pages that referenced appointments with Charlie or with Wendy that pertained particularly to the crime. Now, my understanding is that this page was at the beginning of her 2014 planner and had this license number on it, but that was not requested specifically in discovery because it didn't have to do with any of the co-conspirators, and it wasn't written on the page that was during the date in question. So technically, would not have had to turn that page over. And that was a pretty damning piece of evidence that the state brought forward. So that right there, turning over discovery that wasn't necessary could be ineffective assistance of counsel, because they could argue that if Donna hadn't had that license and that license and make and model number in the front of her planner, they may not have, dinged her for having that piece of information that she could have given to Charlie, who could have given to Catherine, who could have given to Sigfredo. So there's that. So it looks like I don't have any more questions here in chat. I want to say thank you for being with me tonight. Thanks for helping me recap this and unpack my feelings about the trial. Tomorrow we will be back early in the morning, 8:30 Eastern time, which is 7:30 Central. I will be streaming for the entire day. Definitely going to be there in the chat with you guys. I really appreciate our kind and funny and also snarky chat. I really apologize because after I ended the live stream, I wasn't able to go back and look at the chat. So I didn't even see what you guys were talking about there for the last few minutes, because I was so concerned about figuring out what's going on with the stream. So my apologies for not addressing anything that happened in the chat during that last little while. Somebody asked another, I saw a question mark. Oh, Dee Dee LaBelle, how are you? Thanks, I'm doing well. I'm doing a lot better. Today I was just a little bit froggy in the voice when I woke up, but my congestion is gone, my achiness is gone. I'm feeling a lot better. So thank you for asking. I appreciate it. We made it through that little sinus hiccup. Now, a little later in the evening, just about in a half an hour here, I will be on with Latter Daily Digest. It is a bit of it's a fun time. Weirdness ensues. There's a big panel of us talking about Mormon adjacent things, and it's always fun and a good time if you just want to hang out in the chat. Georgiana's asking how long the jury will be out, and I don't think they'll be out for very long, based on the fact that Joel Waldman was saying today that while the defense witnesses were up there, they were barely paying attention until cross-examination came up. I think it sounds to me like they've already pretty much made up their mind, and that there's not going to be a whole lot that's going to change it at this point. So hopefully see some of you guys on Tuesdays with Tim on Latter Daily Digest channel a little bit later. And I will be in the chat on Web Sleuths tonight, so who knows? There's a chance that Trisha could say, Megan, can you pop on for just a second? Sometimes does happen, especially when I'm doing these recaps. So it's great to see you guys. Thanks for following this case with me. I'm looking forward to lots more with you guys until we find justice for Dan Martell once again. Hopefully Wendy will be charged at some point as well. And I am grateful that I'm able to do these recaps for those of you who don't like to be in the trial all day long, every day. So I appreciate you guys being here for me. And don't worry, there's more true crime and healing and healthy things to come. And we will see. We'll just see what happens. Take care, guys. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And we'll see you again tomorrow.